was Halloween night, and the house was alive with laughter and music. I stood in the corner, dressed as a ghost, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. My friends laughed and danced, but I felt out of place, like I wasn't really in the spirit of the night. The party was going strong when I noticed two guys arguing loudly near the snack table. I tried to ignore it, focusing instead on the punch bowl. I wasn't really thirsty, but it helped ease my tension. Suddenly the argument escalated. Voices rose, people turned to watch, and a chill ran down my spine. Before I could process it, there was a loud bang, and everything changed. It took a second for my brain to catch up to what was happening. A shooting? Was this real? The laughter turned to screams, and people began to panic. I dropped my cup and felt my heart race. I ducked behind the couch, trying to make myself as small as possible. I could hear the chaos around me, shouts, cries, and the distant wail of sirens. My mind raced as I replayed the scene. Who was hurt? What had caused this? All I wanted was to be safe and away from it all. As the cops arrived, flashing lights lit up the house. I peeked out from behind the couch, my heart pounding. I saw people being led out, some with injuries. The next day of school, rumors started that the fight started over a girl. It's crazy how a single argument can turn into that. I'm glad no one died, but it's still such a shame. Halloween, once my favorite night, had turned into a nightmare, and I knew it would never feel the same. It was Halloween night, and I went to a party with my friends. We all had a good time, but things could get weird with Zach. He liked to think he ran the group and could be a real jerk. We all knew he was a decent guy deep down, but he could annoy us too. At the party, everyone was drinking, everyone but me. I didn't want to get drunk. I was still sad about my breakup just a week before. I watched my friends have fun while I sat there, feeling out of place. Eventually, I decided it was time to go home. They all wanted me to stay and drink, but Zach was being annoying again, so I left. The walk back to our dorm was quiet, and I breathed in the cool night air. But then I noticed a shadow behind me. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it was just someone out for a late-night stroll. But as I turned onto a different street, I saw him follow me. My heart started to race. This was getting creepy. I quickened my pace, thinking maybe I could lose him, but every time I looked back, he was still there. Panic set in, and I broke into a run. After just a half a block, I glanced back again, and he was running too. This was no accident. I was definitely being followed. I spotted a house with a dark yard and ducked behind it. I tried to catch my breath, my heart pounding like a drum. I stayed quiet, hoping he would pass by. After what felt like forever, I finally pulled out my phone and called an Uber. When the car pulled up, I peeked out from behind the house. I didn't see him, but I wasn't taking any chances. I dashed to the car and jumped in. As I pulled away, I couldn't believe how lucky I was to have escaped. I was so relieved to be safe, far away from whoever that guy was. It was Halloween night in the late 80s, and I was home alone, excited to give out candy to the trick-or-treaters. My parents had decided to take a weekend trip, leaving me in charge of our cozy little house. The evening started out great. Kids dressed in costumes raced up and down the street, laughter echoing through the cool autumn air as I poured candy into bright orange bags. As the clock ticked towards 10 p.m., I noticed a figure lingering at the edge of the driveway. He was wearing a Michael Myers costume, gray coveralls, a creepy white mask that hid his face, and he didn't seem to belong to any of the groups of kids. He was alone, standing there, and every 30 minutes or so, he would wander back to my porch, holding out a small bag in anticipation. You were just here," I would say, trying to mask the unease creeping into my chest. Each time, he would simply nod silently, his eyes hidden beneath the mask. My nerves shot up with every return, and I wasn't sure if he was playing a trick or if something was genuinely off about him. Finally, I couldn't shake the feeling any longer. Okay, that's enough. You need to stop coming back, all right? I snapped at him, trying to sound more assertive than I felt. He stared at me in silence, a bizarre calmness in his demeanor that was unsettling, before turning away and disappearing into the darkness. Relieved, I thought the weirdness was over, and after a while, I turned off the porch light, closed the door, and began to settle down for the night. I decided to take a shower, attempting to wash off the unease of the evening. I called my best friend, Lisa, telling her about the strange guy in the Michael Myers costume, and we both laughed it off. She thought it was just funny, a typical Halloween prank. I hung up feeling a little better, but something still nagged at me. Later, as I lay in bed, pulling the covers tightly around me, I suddenly woke up to an eerie silence in the house. The clock on my nightstand read 11:30 p.m. That's when I noticed my bedroom door was slightly ajar, which was strange. I always closed it before bed. I felt a chill sweep through the room, goosebumps rising on my skin from the unexpected cold. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, my heart pounding with unease as I stepped out of the covers. I crept towards the door, peeking into the darkened hallway. An unsettling thought crossed my mind. Had I forgotten to lock the back door after giving out candy? As I walked down the hallway, I noticed the back door was wide open. Fear gripped my chest. What if someone had come in? Panic sent me racing back to my room, but as I did, I felt a strong hand clamp down on my mouth from behind. I froze, fighting against the pressure of the grip. With adrenaline surging through me, I twisted away from the hold, finally breaking free and gasping for breath. It was him, the guy from earlier, clad in that damned Michael Myers costume. My instincts kicked in. I sprinted out the front door, barely stopping to catch my breath as I pounded on my neighbor's door. I could hear my voice trembling as I screamed for help. The police arrived quickly, taking my frantic recounting seriously. They searched the house, moving through every room, but the intruder was nowhere to be found. My parents were informed and rushed home from their trip, concerned and shaken by the news. The relief of being safe was overshadowed by the chill that settled in my bones. The stranger in the Michael Myers costume had vanished into thin air as if he'd never been there at all. 5 months later, our family packed up and moved out. The trauma lingered, a dark shadow over what had once been a happy home. Even now, every Halloween sends a shiver through me, and I can't shake the feeling that somewhere out there, he's still lurking, waiting for another unsuspecting victim. To make matters worse, whoever that guy was ended up coming back the next Halloween to the people that my parents sold that house to. Although we're not 100%, it was the same guy. A guy in a Michael Myers costume did come about 5 times, they said, just to ask for candy. And I know this because my mom told me after the new owners contacted her. They were family friends and they knew about the accident, but they didn't care. Apparently this time he did speak and said trick or treat with a really deep voice, which indicated that he was a grown man, at least this guy was. They said they were really weirded out and told him to stop coming back. But he came back still, and after the 5th time they decided to just call the cops. But nothing came about it. To this day, we have no idea who that man was. It was Halloween night in the late 80s. I was 8 years old, and like every kid in the neighborhood, I was buzzing with excitement. My friends and I donned our costumes, clowns, monsters, and a rather convincing pirate, and hit the streets, eager to fill our plastic buckets with candy. The air was thick with the smell of autumn leaves, and laughter echoed all around us as we darted from house to house. But then, just as we reached a particularly dimly lit street, I noticed him. A man standing on the corner, watching us with an unsettling intensity. He wore a dark hoodie, the shadows pulling over his face like a veil, making it impossible to discern any features. I nudged my best friend, Timmy, who was dressed as a ghost. "Do you see that guy?" I whispered, trying to keep my voice low, not wanting to alarm the others. "Yeah, he's creepy," Timmy replied, his eyes wide. We turned to our friends, who were too busy vying over glow sticks and candy to notice the figure. As we continued down the street, I felt a growing unease. The man seemed to follow us, lingering just out of sight on the parallel sidewalk like a shadow chasing the light. I nudged Timmy again. "What if he's trying to take our candy? Or worse?" "Let's just get to the next house," he suggested, sounding uncertain, but I could see the worry creeping into his eyes as well. We hurriedly approached the next house, ringing the doorbell and hollering, "Trick or treat!" The homeowner, an elderly lady, tossed handfuls of chocolates and gummies into our buckets, but panic crept over me. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Stealing a glance back over my shoulder, my heart dropped. The man was now much closer, standing under a streetlight, his face still obscured. I could feel my legs wanting to bolt, to escape whatever threat loomed, but I didn't want to scare my friends. After gathering our loot, we decided to head back towards the more populated areas. We stuck together, my heart pounding, every step feeling heavier with the weight of fear. The laughter around us seemed distant now, almost a ghostly echo cut off by the heavy silence that surrounded our small group. Suddenly, the streetlights flickered, plunging us into darkness for a brief heartbeat. My breath hitched in my throat, and when the lights flickered back to life, the man was gone. I felt a fleeting relief, but it quickly twisted into confusion and dread. Where had he gone? "Maybe he's just left," Timmy said, trying to shake off the tension that hung over us. "Let's just keep moving," I urged, trying to remain calm. We turned down another street, but soon realized we were well away from the bustling homes. The air felt thicker, almost suffocating, and the Halloween decorations seemed to scowl down at us. And then, out of nowhere, we heard rustling from the bushes behind us. "Did you hear that?" Sarah, dressed as a witch, whispered, her voice quivering. As we turned, the bushes rustled again, and I caught a glimpse of something, a dark shape. It was too quick to be certain. Panic took hold, and we sprinted, running faster than I'd ever run in my young life. Adrenaline surged through me, breathing loudly in my ears as we desperately looked for any sign of safety. We darted through alleys and around corners, hearts racing. I kept glancing over my shoulder, and that was when I saw him. The man was there, following us. He wasn't just watching, he was chasing us now, and my pulse thundered in fear. "Run!" I shouted, but the words were barely above a gasp. We turned a corner onto a side street, the sound of our footsteps a frantic rhythm pounding against the asphalt, and just like that, the man seemed to vanish again, swallowed by the shadows as quickly as he had appeared. We stumbled to a stop, breathless, glancing at each other in fusion. Did we lose him? Timmy panted, his face pale. "I don't know," I murmured, feeling dread gnaw at my insides. But we had to get home, and together we started walking again, still on edge, but hoping we were finally safe. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a movement, catching a glimpse of the dark figure again, lurking down at the end of the street, just out of reach. We turned and dashed down the road, finally making it to the small cluster of houses where lights were on, and there were parents chatting on porches. It was only when we arrived back at our neighborhood, panting and shaken, that we realized we'd lost track of time. Our parents had been searching for us, calling our names into the night. Tears streamed down my face as I recounted the story, but all I heard were hushed tones and frantic whispers among the adults, concern etching their faces. The police were called, scouring the area, but the man was never found. They assured us it was probably just a coincidence, perhaps a harmless prankster, but I never believed that. Every Halloween after that, I couldn't help but look over my shoulder. The man, the dread, and that flicker of darkness would always remain etched into my memory, a chilling reminder of a night that had seemed so innocent at first. I decided to go to a Halloween party with my friends, and we all thought it would be a blast to dress up as little mermaids. The evening started off on a great note, with laughter and fun as we admired each other's costumes and danced to the spooky tunes echoing through the party. The decorations were fantastic, featuring carved pumpkins, cobwebs, and even a fog machine that added to the eerie atmosphere. As the night went on, the party became more lively, and we enjoyed playing various games. We chatted with other guests, and I even remember taking plenty of photos to capture the night, although some shots were a bit blurry from all the excitement. After about 2 hours, things started to blur together. My memory isn't very clear after that point, but I remember stepping outside for some air, only to find myself in a car. I soon realized it was an Uber, though I had no recollection of calling one. The driver seemed rather quiet, maintaining his focus on the road. Meanwhile, I was in the back seat, feeling confused and a bit rowdy, but he didn't react to my antics. I caught him occasionally observing me through the rearview mirror, which made me feel uneasy despite my intoxicated state. Trusting my instincts, I stopped trying to engage him in conversation and quieted down, hoping to reassure myself. Strangely, he then initiated small talk, which only amplified my discomfort. I answered briefly, attempting to appear more sober than I was feeling. My anxiety rose, yet I focused on keeping the situation calm. When we arrived at my home, he politely asked if I needed assistance. I thanked him and declined, but as I opened the car door, I found myself on the ground. Almost immediately, he was at my side, helping me to my feet. I inquired about what had happened, to which he responded that I had simply fallen. Embarrassed, I apologized and thanked him again, insisting I could manage on my own. He watched from his car until I made it to my front door, which seemed considerate at the time. I chalked up my earlier misgivings to being excessively paranoid from drinking. Once inside, I settled in and, feeling exhausted, drifted off to sleep quickly. Hours later, a loud knock startled me awake. Still a bit groggy, I checked my Ring camera and saw the Uber driver standing at my door. My heart skipped a beat as I was sure I remembered him vividly from both reality and sporadic dreams I had during my sleep. I couldn't comprehend why he was back. Through the camera, I asked why he had returned. He insisted that I had left my keys with him, which was simply untrue. Puzzled, I checked my keychain and found all my keys present, confirming that he was mistaken or, worse, not being truthful. I told him politely but firmly that he must have the wrong person because I had all my keys. His demeanor shifted, growing insistent and commanding, demanding I open the door. Alarmed, I threatened to call the police, at which he began banging on the door, shouting obscenities. Terrified, I promptly called the authorities, giving them details, and later reported the incident to Uber. The police arrived, and I was grateful for their presence, yet still shaken by the encounter. When the police arrived, they spoke with him outside. He attempted to present himself as if everything was fine, trying to convince them it was a misunderstanding. To my disappointment, the officers gave him a warning, reminding him to avoid situations like this in the future. Although the outcome left me feeling unsettled, my primary concern was ensuring he would never return to my home or bother me again. I hoped this incident would be enough to deter him from further contact. It was Halloween night, and I found myself at a college party, Halloween decorations strewn everywhere and a cacophony of laughter and music filling the air. I was a few drinks in when I decided it was a great idea to step out for some fresh air. The night was still young, and I had always loved the chill of the autumn breeze, especially on such a festive night. I noticed the enchanting view of the nearby lake, shimmering under the moonlight. I stumbled down the path leading to the lake, feeling unsteady but exhilarated. The quietness of the water contrasted starkly with the raucous laughter echoing in the distance. I found a bench along the shore, sat back, and let my thoughts wander. Gradually, I succumbed to the calming aura of the lake, losing track of time while staring out into the darkness. After about 30 minutes, though, I sensed an odd presence. Across the lake, a figure stood still on the opposite shore. At first, I brushed it off, convincing myself it was just another partygoer enjoying the scenery, or perhaps someone who had come to watch the eerie beauty of Halloween night. But as I continued to gaze, the figure began to give me an unsettling vibe. To shake off my unease, I pulled out my phone, plugged in my earbuds, and started playing some music. The upbeat tunes drowned out the lingering discomfort, and I managed to forget about the figure for a while. However, nearly 20 minutes later, I glanced up and froze. The person was no longer standing still, and were now halfway across to my side of the lake. My heart began to race. Feeling a chill creeping up my spine, I decided it was time to leave. Gathering my belongings, I took one last look at the figure and noticed they had started walking towards me. Anxiety surged through me, and I quickened my pace along the path, hoping to outdistance them. To my horror, I realized they had also picked up their pace, getting closer with every hurried step I took. I could see the faint light of the street I lived on in the distance, but I instinctively chose to veer into the alley instead of heading straight home. Maybe I could lose them there. My breath quickened as adrenaline coursed through my veins. When I finally reached my front door, I hurriedly shoved my key into the lock, pushed the door open, and bolted inside, slamming it shut behind me. For a moment, I felt safe. I leaned against the door, my heart racing, trying to shake off the feeling of dread. But later that night, I was stirred awake by the blaring sound of a car alarm, and I lay in my bed, hoping my neighbors would eventually get up to check it out. However, after what felt like an eternity, the noise persisted, and I could tell it wasn't stopping. With a sinking feeling, I climbed out of bed and made my way to the window. Peering out, I was struck with terror as I realized the alarm belonged to my car parked right outside. I dashed for my keys, my stomach dropping as I rushed to turn off the relentless alarm. But as I stepped outside, a glint on the ground caught my attention. Shattered glass littered the pavement around my passenger side. Panic surged through me. Who could have done this? I scanned my surroundings, half expecting to see the figure from the lake lurking nearby, but the night was eerily still. My mind raced. Could it have been the person who followed me? There was no way to know for certain. I felt helpless and decided to call the cops, but when they arrived, their response was less than reassuring. They took a report, but their demeanor lacked urgency, and it left me feeling even more vulnerable. In the days that followed, I took precautions. I installed security cameras, one at the front door, one at the back, and one covering the garage. Surrounded by the chilling aftermath of that Halloween night, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, nor could I erase the image of the mysterious figure from my mind. It was Halloween night, and my boyfriend Jake and I were excited to enjoy a cozy evening at home. We had stocked up on candy for trick-or-treaters, carved our pumpkins, and even dressed up in our favorite costumes. Everything felt perfect until the sun went down. As night fell, we settled on the couch with a Halloween movie playing in the background. The wind howled outside, creating a spooky atmosphere that made us laugh and cuddle closer. But then, around the time we finished our first bag of popcorn, we heard it. A strange scratching sound coming from the ceiling. "What was that?" Jake asked, glancing up. "I don't know. It's probably just the wind," I replied, trying to sound calm, but I could feel my heart race. I turned up the volume on the TV, hoping it would drown out the noise. But the scratching continued, growing more persistent. It sounded like fingernails dragging against wood. Jake paused the movie and looked at me, his brow furrowed. "We should check it out. It could be a raccoon or something." "Are you sure? What if it's a ghost?" I joked nervously. But the playful banter didn't ease the tightening in my stomach. Despite my fears, Jake got up and headed toward the attic door, which was nestled in the hallway. "Just stay here." He opened the creaky door and climbed up the ladder. I felt a chill run down my spine as I peered up into the darkness. "Hello? Is anyone up there?" Jake called out. For a moment there was silence, and then I thought I heard a faint rustling. My mind raced with thoughts of what could possibly be up there. "Jake, come down," I urged, my voice shaking. "Just a second," he replied, his curiosity getting the better of him. I couldn't help but hold my breath as he disappeared into the attic. A minute passed, then two. I paced back and forth, glancing at the attic door, my pulse pounding in my ears. Suddenly, I heard Jake's voice, but it was laced with confusion and caution. Sarah, you might want to come up here." Reluctantly, I climbed the ladder, my hands sweaty. When I reached the top, I saw him standing by our old boxes, his face pale. "What is it?" I whispered, scanning the dark space. That's not just an old box." I squinted, and as my eyes adjusted, I saw him, A scruffy man huddled in a pile of our old clothes, his eyes wide and frightened. "Who are you?" I gasped, stepping back instinctively. I didn't mean to scare you," the man stammered, his voice shaky. "I've been living up here for a while. I'm sorry. I didn't know you were back." "What do you mean you've been living here?" Jake shouted, anger flaring in his voice. "Get out!" "I had nowhere else to go," the man said, tears brimming in his eyes. "I didn't want to disturb you. I thought if I stayed quiet, you wouldn't notice." I felt a mixture of pity and fear. I didn't want to be rude to someone who might be struggling, but he was in our home without permission. I looked at Jake, who was just as confused as I was. Maybe we should call the police," I suggested hesitantly. The man's face fell. "Please don't do that. I'll leave. I swear. Just give me a second to pack my things." "I don't know if we can trust you," Jake said firmly. "You broke into our home." As we stood there, the tension grew thicker. Finally, Jake pulled out his phone and dialed 911. "Hello. We have an intruder in our home," he said, his voice steady but strained. The man's face twisted in anguish as he begged, "I won't hurt you." I felt my heart race as I watched him. He didn't seem threatening, but the fear of the unknown kept me on edge. I tucked myself behind Jake, wanting to feel secure. When the police arrived, we explained everything, and they carefully escorted the man out. I watched him go, feeling a strange sadness mixed with relief. I could see in his eyes that he was desperate, but it didn't change the fact that he had trespassed in our home. It was Halloween night, and everyone was celebrating. I was at a party, laughing and dancing with friends, but I got a little too drunk. I didn't want to be a burden to anyone, so when I got kicked out, I decided to head to a bar nearby. The bar was dimly lit, and people were chatting and having a good time. I was feeling lonely, sitting at the bar, when a guy came over. He seemed cool and friendly, so when he offered to give me a ride home, I agreed. I told him straight up that I wasn't looking for anything else but a ride. He smiled and said, "No problem." When we arrived at my place, he asked if he could come inside. I shook my head and said, "No, that's not part of the deal." Suddenly, his expression changed. He got mad, grabbed my arm, and started to threaten me. My heart raced. I was scared. I tried to hit him, but he hit me back hard. I felt a sharp pain in my nose and realized I was bleeding. I needed to get out of there, so I yanked open the door and stumbled out of the car, but he followed me. He grabbed my hair and told me to go inside. I yelled as loud as I could, "Help! Someone, please!" That made him let go, and he jumped back, cursing under his breath as he got back into his car and drove off. Shaking, I rushed inside and called the cops. I told them everything, my voice trembling. With the help of the bar, they were able to figure out who that guy was. Thank goodness they took me seriously. A few days later, I got a restraining order against him. I also pressed charges. It felt good to take control back. I never thought a fun Halloween night could turn so scary, but I was determined to move on and stay safe.